Let us read from Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 to 6. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Someone once asked an old sailor what the hardest part of sailing was. They expected him to mention storms, waves, or the fear of shipwreck. But he answered, "The hardest part is letting go of the shore. As long as the sailor clings to the harbor, he never discovers what lies beyond it. At some point, he must release what feels safe and move into waters he does not know." That image captures something of Ecclesiastes chapter 11. For much of the book, the preacher has stood on the shoreline of human understanding, trying to make sense of life merely from what he could observe under the sun. He examined wisdom, pleasure, success, labor, wealth, relationships, and human achievement. Yet, every road seemed to end in the conclusion, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But in Ecclesiastes 11, despair begins to give way to trust. The preacher still does not understand every mystery of life, but he begins to lift his eyes above the sun. Instead of demanding certainty, he learns faith. Human wisdom requires certainty before action, a clearly visible path before we take a step. We want guarantees before generosity, security before surrender, clarity before faith. But verse 1 advises, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days." These words may refer to a farmer scattering seed or a merchant sending goods across the sea. Either way, the message is clear. Release what you have, even when you cannot guarantee the outcome. These are remarkable words coming from a man who long wrestled with the frustration of uncertainty. Now, uncertainty becomes a reason to trust God. The preacher is beginning to realize that life cannot be mastered by human calculations. We must entrust ourselves to God and move forward even when we cannot see the end of the road. As 2 Corinthians 5 says, we walk by faith, not by sight. Faith does not mean recklessness. It means acknowledging the faithfulness of God and His ultimate sovereignty for good in the greatest uncertainty. It means we obey, give, serve, love, and labor without demanding control over the outcome. Verse 2 continues, "Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth." Instead of the earlier anxiety, now the preacher makes uncertainty a motivation for generosity and diligence. Uncertainty makes it futile to cling too tightly to earthly things. Life's fragility forbids our wasting it in fear. Many opportunities are lost because fear keeps us standing still. Fear of failure, of disappointment, of not having control. A lack of control over every outcome must not paralyze us into inaction while we wait for perfect conditions. For instance, I'll serve the God once my life settles down. I'll give when I'm financially secure. I'll trust God when I know how it's going to affect my future. But verse 4 reminds us, "He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap." In other words, The person who waits for guarantees may never do anything at all. Verse 5 describes this in more depth. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. The beginning of life is mysterious, beyond comprehension, despite our observation or scientific dissection or analysis. Nobody knows how and when the spirit of a human being clothes itself with flesh to begin life in the womb. How much less can we understand the hidden workings of God? This is one of the greatest turning points in Ecclesiastes. Now the preacher lets go of his frustration at not being able to grasp life's patterns. Instead, he begins to accept that God's ways are larger than human understanding. The book of Job ends similarly. After all his questioning and wrestling, Job finally confessed in chapter 42, verse 3, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me. Humility begins to grow when we stop trying to play God. Faith begins when we discard the illusion of control. Perhaps that is one of the hardest lessons for us to learn. There are no guarantees in this life. There are no explanations for every sorrow, no certainty for every decision. Yet, God calls us to trust Him on the basis of what He has already revealed and done. Verse 6 says, In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper. The answer to uncertainty is not despair or passivity. It is faithful perseverance in the duties of righteousness and worship. For as 1 Corinthians 15:58 reminds us, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. Not in vain. That phrase is beautiful in light of Ecclesiastes. So much of the book wrestles with the fear that everything is vain. But when life is connected to God, even ordinary faithfulness and monotonous drudgery gains eternal significance. The preacher's shift in emphasis is visible in verse 7. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. Whereas life's brevity troubled him earlier, he now starts receiving life as a gift and not a burden. While the preacher still recognizes that death is real and that the days of darkness will be many, he realizes that death does not erase the goodness of life. Life is fleeting, but not meaningless. All beauty, every kindness, every common moment of shared love becomes a gift from the hand of God. James chapter 1 verse 17 says, Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. Our faith in God does not deny suffering or mortality. But because we know God, sorrow is not the final word. And so the preacher now encourages joy in youth and strength. Verse 9 says, Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, for these are gifts from God. Yet he reminds us, but know that for all these things, God will bring you into judgment. Suddenly, life is no longer viewed merely as being under the sun. We are accountable to God. Freedom is not autonomy. The ultimate aim of life is not pleasure. Rather, life matters because it comes from God. Is lived under His gaze and will be judged by Him. Earlier, the preacher saw only futility in the reality of universal death. For him, death nullified the significance of life. But now, he realizes that life is properly understood only in relation to eternity. And so he points us toward Christ. For the purpose and power of life is revealed most comprehensively and perfectly in Jesus Christ, who entered the world of death to atone for our sin, die for us, break the power of death on our behalf, and rise again in victory. Because Christ rose from the grave, vanity does not have the final word. Because He lives, our labor for Him is not in vain. Because He is our propitiation, we can stand before God forgiven and accepted. The preacher saw the first rays of dawn. The gospel reveals the sunrise. If we are restrained by fear from living by faith, Ecclesiastes 11 reminds us that life was never meant to be mastered by our wisdom. Some things are always hidden beyond our comprehension, and they give us the opportunity to learn faith in the God to whom nothing is hidden. So cast your bread upon the waters. Sow your seed persistently. Receive life as God's gift. Rejoice with reverence. Walk humbly before Him. And in every uncertainty, remember that the God above the sun is still sovereign over all the world and every power beneath it. God bless.